All right. Well, some other good ideas, and another really good writer that we like. Now, we're going to talk about here in a minute. But first I want to say that there's two things that I really like, and that's great writing and interesting perspectives on quality and the world of quality and how you can improve. And to my great good fortune, this article that we're going to talk about really presented both of those things, and it was one of the first ones we presented here in 2019. The title of the piece is Chekhov's Gun at the Gemba. And it was written by Harish Jose, and he is a lean practitioner. He's a lot of things, but lean is really his bailiwick, and that's where he works, and it appeared in yesterday's issue of Quality Digest's newsletter. So in the article, he takes a classic piece of wisdom, and it's a quote that appeared in several different variances over Anton Chekhov's career. Of course, he was a great Russian playwright. He was a short story writer. And this quote that I'm going to mention is one that appeared, like I say, in very different forms over the course of his life and his career. It comes down to the advice that a writer shouldn't show a gun in the first act or the first chapter, as the case may be, of a work if he or she isn't planning on that gun going off at some point later in the story.
Right.
Now, many people think that Chekhov's gun is about foreshadowing. They'll say, well, that means that you're foreshadowing something's going to happen.
Right.
Sure, it's a little bit about that, but really what it's more about is about utility and efficiency. It's about making sure that whatever you're going to use, whatever you're intending to use for a purpose, has a purpose, and that it has a place, or else why is it there in the first place, right? If it's not intended to have a use, why are you even putting it out there? I mean, anything that anyone puts on stage really should have a meaning and a purpose to the audience, communicate something. It's really no different on the shop floor. Everything that's there that you're going to work with has a purpose, has a meaning for the people that are in that space, the people that are working in that space. And that's a really important thing to consider. So how does Jose translate this to the lean workplace and lean workflows? Well, he offers some interesting physical and visual examples of this. The first one he says is there's value in having a definite fixed place for all your tools and materials. I mean, talking about things like shadow boards. And
right.
There's a real value for that, where everyone knows where things go and they can see right away how a process works and how you do it. That's really important. The other thing is that these tools and materials should be close in hand and easily accessible to the operator. That's just really good lean process right there. I mean, if you're going to be doing a workflow, make sure everything is right there where you can use it without having to bend or stoop or walk or whatever. That's all muda. These should also permit the best sequence of motion. Again, this is just really straight out of the TPS, the lean playbook. I mean, you don't want to waste motion. That's muda as well. So, if you're having something here that's earlier in the process while you're using your left hand, well, put it here, and then put the thing later in the process there, as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah.
You just don't want to do this and that. You want to just kind of flow normally around it. Another one is that two or more jobs can and should be worked on at the same time. Well, if you can, just be as efficient as you can and do your process. Two or more operations should be carried out simultaneously as well on the job if you can. And then finally, just overall motion should be minimized. And a lot of these insights really encapsulate, again, some of the collected wisdom of lean and TPS as it's evolved over the course of time. And it really goes back before that, before Toyota, to the days of Henry Ford and Frederick Winslow Taylor, the whole thing about time and motion studies and efficient work. I mean, a lot of that stuff's been disproven over the course of time, but there was some good theory behind that. The idea that you want to really study what you're doing and understand the various pieces of a process to improve it. And I, as I often do, think about this idea, Chekhov's gun, and how Joe's kind of framed it in a little more philosophical of a way. I mean, for example, I mean, if you consider a process-based muda, right, that everyone sees, and because everyone sees it, they have an understanding of it on a conceptual level, and they understand that waste eventually is going to go off. Right, like a gun goes off. Waste is going to go off in the form of lost opportunities and lost profits, and eventually probably lost customers. So ignoring it isn't an option, right? But we do ignore it. I mean, I think about, like, say, this gun and a process is the same thing. They're going to go off. If you put it out there and you put it on stage, if you put your muda in your plant, it's going to be employed.
Eventually,
it's going to eventually go off. Now think about your customers, and whether you realize it or not, customers are akin to an audience at a theater, right? I mean, I thought about this when I was reading the article. I mean, they see everything that's happening, even though they're often powerless to change the action, right? Well, but they're really not powerless, because Audiences at a bad play can get up and leave, and the play goes on, but they can make the choice not to suffer through it. Your customers can leave too. Right. They don't have to suffer through your bad process, and they will. I mean, they're going to leave if they experience those negative repercussions of a process that's loaded with Muda, right? I mean, they know that bad processes are going to eventually go off to their detriment, and they probably don't want to stick around to suffer the consequences of that. So, it's interesting when you think about this. A customer is really just observing.
Huh.
They really don't have a lot of power other than the power to leave.
Yeah.
And oftentimes customers that leave, we know this, don't say, I'm leaving. This is why I'm leaving.
Right.
They just don't give you any more orders.
Right.
And especially online now where you may have thousands of customers that you don't really know that well, you just see them order or not. Well, if your process is not slicked out, if it's a lot of waste involved, that's what's going to happen. Your customers are going to get up and leave just like an audience at a bad play.
That's interesting. I like that connection you make.
I mean, I think it's true though.
Yeah.
I mean, don't you think that that's really what happens? I mean, you often don't hear from a dissatisfied customer. You hear a lot more from the satisfied customers than the dissatisfied ones generally.
And I mean, just taking this analogy a little bit further, is also if your customer is your audience, and you have telegraphed or foreshadowed either something positive and you don't deliver, or you have foreshadowed something negative, either one of those is going to cause you to lose a customer. If you hint that something's coming, either advertently or inadvertently, and you don't deliver, you're going to lose a customer. If you advertently or inadvertently, usually inadvertently, hint that something bad is taking place, then again you may have customers bail before they hear the shot go off because they don't want to be there when it happens.
Right, exactly.
Right, exactly. Particularly if it's interaction, if it's transactional. Banks, healthcare. If it's a product, they may wait around to see whether something happens or not. Yeah. But if it's transactional, like this. Well, Apple's not a good example, but with a bank, let's say, if a bank has kind of foreshadowed or shown the gun that something negative may happen with that bank or that financial institution, they may have people bail just on the fear of seeing the gun.
And it could be fairly subtle, It could be an experience you have in the lobby, at dealing with a teller where the wait lines are really long. I mean, whatever.
Whatever.
You need to be looking at this stuff actively and driving out waste. I mean, it's just good advice all the time. But I mean, it's an interesting framework to put it in this perspective of this idea of this gun that's
Chekhov's gun.
there for a reason. Yeah, absolutely.